Hey, and welcome to the Neurodivergent Musician Podcast. I'm your host, John Hart. And today I'll be joined by a very special guest and mate, Mr. Tommy Luce, where we'll be talking about solo musician life. I'll let him introduce himself in a sec, but each episode is broken up into a traffic format where we'll share insights in the red section, improvised babble in the amber, and a recommendation or tip you might find handy in the green. So let's head on over to the red section where Tommy will introduce himself. So, okay, we're back into the red section. So, Tommy, I know enough about you, man. We've done many tours. We've worked on lots of different things, but tell everybody who you are.
Sure. So, yeah, thanks for having me first, mate. By the way, I really appreciate it. It's nice to chat to you. And I'm a guitarist and harp guitarist primarily, based in Lincolnshire, in England, in the UK. I do live gigs, I do recording and composition, I do some teaching, and I used to be a music examiner and a university lecturer. Don't do as much of that now. And I also work in artist relations and social media for G7th, the Capo company, based here in the UK.
Amazing. And how long have you been a solo musician?
I started properly going out and gigging solo guitar-wise in, I think it was about 2007, somewhere around there, so 16 years. I started playing the guitar in 2000 and instantly kind of worked towards the rock band thing, which we still do, not as much nowadays, we still do a bit here and there, but solo guitar-wise, around about 2007, so 16 years or somewhere in that region.
And were you, because I used to do the rock band thing. I went into double digits as a front man, as a guitarist and stuff as well. And how did you find that lifestyle?
I think it's one of those things when you're younger, you don't really think much about, you don't think about much other than getting the gig, really, do you? Yeah, and for us, we started gigging early 2002. And we've done, we did sort of 3 EPs, a full-length album. We did another EP after that one about 6 years ago. And we do bits of recording here and there. We don't gig as much now, but we did a little tour of Holland. We played all over the UK, did some beer fests, that kind of thing, lots of pub gigs. We got to the point of doing, the basement of Rock City and then the Underworld in Camden. So we got to kind of a reasonable way into the toilet circuit, as it's affectionately known, and it was great fun. And I think the thing is, I look back now and think when we were 15, the first gig that we did was in a local pub here. And we were only, I think, between 13 and 15 at the time. So we weren't even old enough to be in there. And one of our mates from school came along who was about a foot shorter than all of us. And they kicked him out. So his dad turns up and said, well, he's in the same class as half these boys in the band, so you better kick the band out then. And so that's how young we were. And we managed to talk them round. And of course, they make a lot more money selling Coca-Cola and lemonade than they do Jack Daniels, don't they? So they didn't mind in the end. Fair enough, we were filling the pub with youngsters, but they were still making lots of money. So they didn't mind after that. Yeah. And it was great. It's kind of the camaraderie. You're learning your instruments together. You're discovering new bands together. And you're in your teen years. So, you're figuring out a lot of stuff about yourself and your identity. And then as we get older, you get jobs, you start driving, partners, houses a bit further down the line, all that kind of thing. You want different things out of life. It all changes. And I think, maybe when you're 18, 19, you think, what's that? We've been offered a gig in Burnley on a Thursday night for 20 quid between 5 of us. We'll be there. That sounds fantastic. And now you think, perhaps we won't do that, So, and what's that? You're going to promote it on the wrong night as well. That's even better. Why didn't you say? So I think, the point that I got to with it is when you realize that you actually do need to care about some of these things a little bit more. You can't just do it for the love of music, man, your whole life. If you keep it a hobby, then there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to do stuff for a living, you have to make a living, don't you? And I think it's that change of mindset between, we don't care if we get paid. Yeah, we'll do it for a few cans of Carling, to, well, actually, no, we could use a few quid to stick in the van, in the tank. And I think it's, as you get older, it gets easier to admit these things. So I've enjoyed it very much. We've you meet lots of great people along the way, and some memories, some not so good memories, but I learned a lot of life lessons through it, definitely. And something like this is really good fun because I get to cast my mind back and think, oh yeah, I can remember getting pulled over in Holland when, I was accidentally in the wrong lane and they were about to open the back of the van and something was about to fall on this guy's feet. I hope I can talk him out of doing that. And little things like that you don't think about all the time, but when you cast your mind back, you think, oh, we did well to get out of that, didn't we? Perhaps I can warn someone not to do what I accidentally did. So, it's character building. We'll call it that, maybe.
And I think, especially with band memories, how did you? Were there some of you that wanted to do it as a hobby, and some of you that wanted to do it as a career, or were? Because the thing I found with bands, sometimes I was very much in a sort of a leader of position. I think it's because I really wanted to make a career out of it, and I was like, I'm trying to, get everyone to go along this line. And the music was amazing, but it might have been the other side, so, the business and all that sort of stuff. And I love the guys and all the musicians that I work with, but sometimes I felt like in some areas I was dragging it to the front line. And the most successful bands, you could have a bit of luck and things as well, but you always tend to sort of think they know their roles within the band. They know they're all starting at the front on the starting line, and then they can gain the momentum in there. And that was my tug of war with band life. You can have politics, you can have all these sort of things, and obviously differences and stuff, which is, to and fro. And that's, you can jump from different bands. But did you get any of that sort of feeling?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, when I started, I'll give you a bit of blurb on it. And funnily enough, I went to see them the other night. We all have one band, don't we, that started it for us. And I know that not everyone will be able to see this. In fact, only you and I can see this because no one else is seeing this. They're just listening to it. If you look behind my shoulder there, you see the guitar with the flames painted all over it. That's the guitar that I bought myself. That's the first guitar I ever bought myself. And I think I was 15. And then I sold it some years later and I bought it back last year. And so it's in the down tuning that I use for the band. And it's like getting an old friend back. I clocked up thousands and thousands of hours on that thing. And for me, back in 2000, my brother went to Woolworths, which you and I will remember Woolworths. Not everyone will they? No. And went to the bargain bin, and where you could get the CD singles for £1. And there was an Iron Maiden single in there of The Wicker Man, which was from the album they released that year, back in 2000. And it had 3 tracks on it. And I had one of those, those ghetto blasters that, 40 quid from Argos kind of thing in my room. And he said, listen to this. And he played me that. And as soon as I heard that one song, it's a bit of a cliche and people talk about it. Oh, everything just changed. It really was like that. It was just I've never heard anything like this before. And my parents are both musicians, more so classical musicians, but they like a lot of other stuff too. And my dad has played guitar for 50 odd years, and he's primarily taught classical guitar and played classical guitar. He does play a bit of electric and acoustic as well. And so we had a classical at home, and I just said to him, right, I've heard this band Iron Maiden. Can you show me how to play like it? And I played it to him, and he said, well, I don't know how to play that stuff, but I can get you started. I can show you some exercises and some chords. And me being 13 thought, I don't want to learn chords. I want to learn that, But of course, it was the right thing to do because, you need to learn something, don't you? We got started with that. And then within, a couple of years, I was in a band and gigging. And that was all that mattered, really. Back then, I mean, it was just a case of all of those bands off the top of my head, Iron Maiden, Metallica, and then getting into bands, the heavier stuff as well, Pantera, Slayer. And then obviously the nu metal thing was huge then. So Linkin Park, Slipknot, Korn. And then, of course, bands kind of outside of that a bit, Rage Against the Machine, Limp Bizkit, System of a Down. And the other guitar player, he was into some stuff that I wasn't as into, which looking back now was really, it did leave a mark on me as well. He liked Red Hot Chili Peppers, he liked Muse,
right?
Bands like that, which I do like. I'm not as big a fan of, but his playing was quite different to mine in that sense. So that was another thing that rubbed off on me. And then my brother was really big into Aerosmith. So I got into Aerosmith through him. Our uncle was a record dealer. So, we used to go and stay with our cousins for a week every summer and used to get educated by them. They were a bit older than us. And I can remember my cousin, I went to see Iron Maiden with him last week, funnily enough. My girlfriend got me tickets for Christmas, and it was amazing. It's about the 7th or 8th time I've seen him. And I still feel like a kid, every time I go and see him, because it's just, yeah, you can say they're older now. They are older now, but they're not just the greatest hits band. Not that there's anything wrong with that. They're still pushing the envelope. They're still doing new stuff. Fair enough, you want to hear all the old stuff as well, but they've got so many albums, they can't play everything that you like. So when you think about it, this is a bunch of guys 65 to 70 still creating new stuff, touring the world. Tell me something that's bad about that, And so it was all I cared about for years. When I left school, I was teaching a bit of guitar, doing a few gigs, and I worked in the bakery at Summerfield. And I think I earned about £400 a month, somewhere around there. And I can remember I used to put, 50, 60 quid in the band fund every month, just in case we wanted to get some more CDs printed or some badges or whatever. And so it was, now I'm in it for the long haul. We're going to go all the way with this, whatever all the way meant, or means. And there were definitely stepping stones with it. So I can remember when we went to Holland in 2012 and we did a tour. It was only 3 gigs. It was meant to be 4, but we only ended up doing 3 for various reasons. And you think, it's like the Anvil film, if you've ever seen that. At least we've got a tour for things to go wrong on. And it was this sort of all for one for all attitude. It was great, and yes, it cost all of us a lot of money, a lot of effort. You get into trouble sometimes, there are mishaps and you figure things out as best you can. And I'm running a few stories through my head now thinking, okay, I probably can't tell that one, probably shouldn't tell this one because this is a nice podcast, isn't it?
There is an explicit thing that I pop on because I tend to swear and a lot of them say, mate, just whatever whatever you feel.
Oh, fantastic. Well, in that case, I'll tell all of them. There was just one particular one that I will tell if it's okay. And I think it's a lovely memory for me. Just because I think it's funny and I think it really sums up, I don't do as much of the rock metal band thing now necessarily, but I still love it. It's still very near and dear and close to my heart. In the last month or so, we've been to see Metallica at Download, Slipknot, we saw Gwar. Hadn't seen Gwar for years. They were fantastic. We went to see Maiden, saw Guns N' Roses. It's been took my 15-year-old to see Guns N' Roses. They'd never been to a big gig like that before. And it was a bit of a well done for getting through your exams for GCSEs type thing. So showing the next generation what it's all about. And so when we did that little tour, it was one of those things that just made you think, oh, this is the next level. We're getting out of England now. We're spreading our disease, doing a devil horn there for people who can't see. Just so you know, I mean it. And we're playing in a different country. This is amazing. And I can remember the Red Hot Chili Peppers were playing just down the road from where we played. And we played at this place called Little Devil in Tilburg. And it's got a devil's face painted on the ceiling. It's really cool. And Paul Di'Anno from Iron Maiden back in the 80s played there a few weeks before we did. And I thought, oh, wow, this is great. And we went on stage at about, 1 a.m. It was an all-dayer. And the pub gave all of us free beer. I was the van driver, so I didn't have any. So everybody else was absolutely annihilated by the time we went to play. It wasn't the best set we ever did, but it was us playing in another country. And I can remember on the way back, driving back about 3 or half 3 in the morning from one part of Holland to another with somewhat primitive sat navs back then, 2012, you did the best you could. There wasn't really internet on phones then. And I can remember being very tired, but trying to keep myself awake. And everybody else was hammered, so they weren't much use. And I can just remember a car behind us, and it was a police car. And whatever it was in Dutch, I don't know, but it had politie, which is presumably the Dutch for police. And it didn't have any blue lights. It just had it going across on sort of a neon thing on the top. And it pulled into a service station, and I didn't realize they wanted me to follow them. So I didn't follow them because they weren't on blue lights. So I just thought, well, I don't know, do I? So I just ignored it. Then they swerved out of it and pulled in front of me. Then they put their lights on. I thought, oh, shit, that probably wanted me to follow them, didn't they? And I was doing the speed limit, but the hanger lane's on the other side, obviously, and I thought, oh, I didn't think of that. So they stopped me, and there was a very young cop and an older cop, like 20 and 40. The young guy had a stick up his ass. He was, have you got any convictions? You've been in trouble? And but he was wording it all very officially, and I didn't really understand a lot of it and whatever. And the other guy was fine. And so I was trying to just deal with him, but the other guy was being a bit of a pain. And everybody else was drunk. So, of course, they breathalyzed me. And I said, no, I'm completely sober. I've not had anything. So I wasn't worried. But it did occur to me that as the older guy came round the back of the van, we did have a 12-inch long penis-shaped plastic drinking utensil called the Dicky Sipper, which used to make someone drink Jägermeister out of if they did something stupid, balanced on top of the merch boxes. And I just thought, if that policeman opens that back door, it's going to go all over his shoes. So I'd like to avoid that, because we're getting on all right. He's telling me how much he loves the Dead Kennedys, and I don't know anything by them, but I've heard of them. So I reckon I can lie enough to go along with and agree with everything he's saying, whilst hoping he doesn't open the door. And he didn't open the door, and it was all fine. And I remember getting back to where we were camping and thinking, that was a bit of a near miss. And then the next morning we broke down going back through Belgium. So that was good fun as well. Oh, and little things like that, you think that was quite stressful, but it was fun at the same time, because we're still here. We got through it. And yeah, it was one of those moments where you just think, I'm not really sure how this is going to turn out, but it'll turn out somehow, won't it? And as long as you don't end up in prison at the end of it, it was a success, you know, and it was great fun. I love looking back at that. And I've still got the T-shirt we got from doing that tour. I found it the other day up in my loft, and I was telling my girlfriend about it. And, you know, it seems a lifetime ago now, and it's not exactly a success story, but it's a story that, you know, when friends of mine who are in bands are going to tour out of the UK for the first time, oh, did anything interesting happen when you did it? You think, right, sit down. There's a few things you need to know.
They're just solid memories, like real wonderful. Like you said, it's adversity. Maybe you're thinking, oh crap, is this going to happen every time we do this? But actually, it's just part of the parcel, I think. Especially band life. You just, you know, if you're going into it thinking it's just going to be straight lines, then it doesn't work like that. Especially in the sort of the dogged days when you're kind of like you're grinding and you're working up the chain in some areas and stuff. So I mean, 100%. Compare that then to crossing over to becoming a solo musician.
Well, yeah, instantly one thing pops into my head, which I'll work up to in a minute, because it's about a friend of both of ours who everyone in the acoustic guitar world will know. It's not a dodgy story concerning him at all, but I don't know if he'll even remember it, but I will tell it in a minute because it's quite funny. I suppose it's a similar kind of story, but just no metal band, just more solo acoustic thing. But I think in terms of the solo acoustic thing, something that I've found is when I'm playing on stage with the rest of the guys, if I get something wrong, I mean, I don't think too much about mistakes anyway, really, because as soon as you've done it, it's gone. But if there's only you on stage on your own, you can't look at anybody else and laugh. I usually laugh stuff off anyway as best I can. But, you know, when we saw Guns N' Roses the other week, Axl Rose fell over in the second song, got up and laughed it off. And I thought, well, good on him. Because my opinion has never been particularly high of him, but he was great. I thought he was fantastic. And I enjoyed my humble pie. I had 2 helpings, you know. And I think when you're doing something on your own, you know, if there's something that goes wrong, you can't look at one of the other guys. You can't look at the other guitar player to make out, oh, was that you who played that wrong note? That was definitely me. You know, there's no drums or vocals or keyboards or whatever else you've got going on. So there is that feeling of nakedness, I think. On the very rare occasion that I do anything without guitar and there's vocals, I still like to have a guitar around my neck because I do feel a bit exposed without it. I'm just used to having it there. But yeah, I've found similar sort of adventures, I suppose, really, and things still go wrong and things still go right, but equally fun. You know, I did. I think this was 2018 or so, and I was invited over to do the Newtonards Guitar Festival, which was wonderful. Like if people haven't been to that, yeah, I've been to loads of those things over the years, and it's one of my favorites. You know, of anywhere in the world. It was so much fun. The people who run it are lovely, and I can remember going over there, and I did a few other gigs while I was there in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And Thomas Lieb was headlining the gig that I was playing. And I thought, oh, blimey, you know, I've been to his boot camp. Thomas is Thomas, you know, he's sort of one of the governors, isn't he, really, of the kind of thing that you do. And I thought, you know, fantastic. And I knew him a little bit already through going to his boot camp. And of course, even if you don't know him personally, you still know of him. It's like Tommy Emmanuel. If you haven't met Tommy or you don't know him personally, you'd have to work pretty hard not to have heard of him if you played the acoustic guitar, especially fingerstyle.
Used to work, yeah.
You have to live under a rock with no other rocks around it on the moon, wouldn't you? Really. And so I thought, oh, blimey, and then Gary Lutton was playing as well. And obviously, Gary, great, lovely guy, very respected guitar player. And he won the Guitar Star thing many years back, didn't he? So I knew his name certainly from that. And I thought, oh, blimey. And I wasn't working for G7th at the time, but of course, those guys both use G7th too. And I can remember getting over there. Gary played first. He was tremendous. And then I played second. And then Thomas headlined. And it was one of those nights where you just think, God, all of that just went right. It was so much fun. Everybody was lovely. And I met lots of people there. One of the guys that did sound, Stephen Wright. Hey, Stephen. I've since become good mates with him. And I went over to do some gigs in Ireland and Northern Ireland a year or so after that. And the person I was staying with cancelled on me the day before. There was a good reason. I can't think what it was now, but I remember just calling him and I said, I'm really sorry to ask, mate, do you know anywhere I can stay? And he said, well, as it happens, I broke my arm a week ago. So I'm staying with my mum. You can stay at my house. And I thought, oh, blimey. So I left him a big bottle of Jack Daniels to say thank you. And turns out he's the guy that does all the artwork and design for the Belfast Harley Davidson chapter. So he took me to a Harley Davidson meet and hog roast. And it was great. Just another thing over there where you just think, oh, I wasn't expecting this, but that's a ton of fun, Another thing I wouldn't normally have gone to because I don't ride Harley Davidsons. And I know when I finished that gig, I went back to the hotel and Thomas was staying there as well. And, we hadn't seen each other for a year or so. So let's have a catch up, let's have a beer. So we were having a drink and everyone does it now. And I think probably John Gom. Hey, John, happy birthday for yesterday, John. I think he was probably one of the first people I saw do this. And he had, people that he loves sign his guitar for him. And, everyone does it now. But I think John was probably one of the first people I saw have do that. So I very much stole that from him. And I got Thomas to sign the back of my guitar. And there was this other chap there. I think his name was Paul. I don't really remember, but he was about 70 or so. And I just said to him, I had to do something. I can't think what it was. And I said, do you mind holding my guitar for a minute, mate? So he held it and I turned around and he was signing it as well. And I thought, oh, okay. I don't know who you are, but cool. Perhaps he's some mystical, like John Renbourn character, who, from the mists of time. And he came back to the hotel. And so Thomas, we didn't know this. So Thomas and I were just chatting away, having a drink. And this guy, Paul, just turns up. That may or may not be his name. I might have changed it for anonymity, but
I'll just go with Paul.
I don't think it matters, does it really? Yeah. A bloke that wasn't me, you, or Thomas Leeb was there. No one will guess that. And this guy got it into his head that if Thomas got his guitar out and played for the rest of the pub, they would just shower us with alcohol and praise. And bearing in mind, it was probably about 11:30 at night. There was a bunch of guys, probably about 75 average age, just sitting, having a chat, having a drink, singing Irish songs in the corner. Thomas's stuff is great, but I don't think they were really up for hearing percussive acoustic guitar. We just you get a vibe, don't you? You look at someone and think, I don't think that's necessarily going to be your thing. But this guy pushed and pushed, and eventually Thomas said, look, all right, fine, I'll play something. And he played, I think it was Swinging the Grooveyard. And I watched it from, 3 feet away. It was amazing. I mean, it's amazing watching him anyway, but he just did this impromptu performance. And I was watching it thinking, these guys it's just not the audience. And he knew that, but being the pro that he is, he did it and just sort of said, cheers, guys. Sorry about that. But the thing that amazed me in the middle of all of it, this guy clears off, goes to the kitchen in the pub, nicks a couple of spoons out of the kitchen, bends them over and starts playing the spoons in inverted commas on his leg whilst Thomas is playing this song. And I thought, I can't really believe this is happening, but I'm glad it is. So I was watching it and I got my phone out to start filming it. And Thomas just gave me one of those looks as if to say, probably best you don't film this, mate, really, isn't it? So I didn't. And afterwards we finished, or rather those two finished. And Thomas and I went back down to our drinks. And this still shocks me to this day. They didn't shower us with booze and women. And we weren't very surprised, but this guy was, and he was irate. So he goes outside and steals a traffic cone, comes in and starts threatening these guys with it. So we managed to get him out. I stuck him in a taxi, gave the guy a tenner and said, look, just take him home. I don't know where he lives, but just get rid of him, And so that's how that night ended. And then in the morning, I had to get the ferry back to Liverpool and then go across to Nottingham via Manchester or somewhere. I can't remember now. And I remember bumping into Clive Carroll at breakfast.
Amazing.
And again,
Carroll.
Clive's another one, isn't he? And you think, God, I can't go anywhere without bumping into one of my idols here, you know. And I'd met Clive a few times, and I didn't have very long, but I thought I'm not going to not sit with him for a bit and have some coffee, you know. So I had a chat with him, and he was telling me all about, you know, if you do this in America, then this is Visa, this is this, you know, gave me some tips and tricks, which I was very grateful for. And just before I left, he said, by the way, if you ever go to America and you take any vegetables with you, make sure you declare them. And just went back to eating his toast. And I thought, well, I can't leave yet. I need to know about that. And so he told me a funny story about how I think it was a parsnip and an onion or something. And he took a parsnip and an onion with him and put one in his luggage in the hold and one in his hand luggage. And he forgot to declare one of them. So he got in trouble for it. And I'm not going to expose him by saying that. I think it's a pretty well-known story in our circles. And I just thought that was a perfect way to end that. And so, yeah, little things like that you couldn't plan for invariably happen as well. And I love that, you know, and I've been over to America and played at the Harp Guitar gatherings and stuff like that, played at NAMM on booths and stuff like that, like for Journey Guitars. Thanks, Journey. They gave me my first NAMM experience. And yeah, I look back now and just kind of think so many things have to slot into place for all this stuff to happen. And I'm not particularly one of these, everything happens for a reason people, because I think it's easy to pick and choose with that. And I don't know the answers, you know, but I'm kind of glad I don't. I look back and I do like to sort of trace the order of events of things that happened. And well, if I hadn't been doing this, I wouldn't have this guitar. Then I wouldn't have gone to NAMM. Then I wouldn't have met the G7th guys. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now, maybe, you know. So yeah, definitely a lot of fun stuff as a solo artist as well. Even though it's a totally different thing from the metal band thing. But I always think as long as there are musicians, primarily guitar players, there's always going to be some kind of mischief. And you'll find it. You know, you just have to sort of decide how far you want to get into it. And if you want to watch it from afar, or if you want to film it, or if you want to try and stop it and put someone in a taxi and just, you know, kind of diffuse the situation and hide all the traffic cones in the area, or if you just want to try and smuggle parsnips over the border. You know, there's always a
story.
There's always a story, and there's always something you have to try and remember not to do. And but either way, to me, they're the bits that make it fun. They're kind of the milestones, and you think, well, probably won't happen again, or to anyone I know. But just in case it does, I better tell them about it, because it gives people a laugh. I like remembering it, and it's fun to talk about, you know, and it prompts a story in their mind that maybe they were a bit embarrassed happened to them, and you think, well, it doesn't seem as bad now, does it? You know. So
does that inspire you? Because the thing is, I think we're the same with our solo music journeys in regards to a lot of solo musicians, or a lot of musicians will be like, right, I want to be able to break it. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to get up the ladder and things as well. But in the way that we talk and the way we've, you know, expressed or just had a chat, and it's not about getting up the chain. It's about experiencing those moments, like you've just said. And I think, have you now, and I think we're probably on the same sort of thing in regards to like when you bring out a new album or when you start to create new music and things, are you seeing this now as this is just for life? This is just something that is not, you're not restricting it, you're not putting boundaries around it, and you're just kind of allowing it just to flow into your life as a solo musician, rather than, you know, I'm on this track, right, if I go and get this opportunity, I go and get this and I go and do this, you know. It's always a game, you know, and if you're playing the game, then you're not living, really. You're always in that sort of space where you have to try and force it. And I think I was at that point one time with bands, and I was as a solo musician, but now I've kind of like gone, no, do you know what? It's if I keep forcing it, I'm never going to create the music I want to. But I don't know. Have you had that experience where it felt forced at one point, and then you went, do you know what? Actually, it's like the Spotify game. All those other games that we try and play, as soon as you go into it, you're like, do you know what? This is not authentic. This is not. inspiring. This feels like I'm a machine. So I've got to go, no, I dabble in it. I've tried it. It did all right for a point, but I was like, this is just too machine worked. And do you find, I don't know, you've gone through experiences of that as well, but now you've just settled into just, do you know what? I'm just going to go with the flow.
Definitely, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think I'm not under any illusion. You know, I'm in a very unique position with what I do with G7th, because the amount of people, I probably get a dozen people a week ask me if there's a job going at G7th. And that's fair enough. That's completely fair enough, because I can remember what it was like when I used to. So if you go back, I started with G7th in July 2019. And before then, I was primarily doing lessons, doing gigs, bits of recording. I was a lecturer on the performance course in Coventry at the university. And I was also a theory examiner, a BTEC examiner, and a practical examiner for Rock School, the exam board. So I was dividing my time between a lot of things. And looking back now, I don't know how I managed it, to be quite honest with you, like in terms of the amount of stress. But something I'm very grateful for are Facebook memories, because things will pop up. Something popped up a few months back from 2017 when I was in India with Rock School. Now, I had no expectation of going to India at any point in my life, not because I didn't want to, but I just thought, I can't think what would take me there necessarily. I can't imagine a gig popping up there. You know, they do gig there, obviously, but I just thought, I can't think how I would end up there. And I went there for 5.5 weeks. And it was incredible. And it was so eye-opening. And there are certain memories from that trip in particular that I'll never forget, that get me a bit emotional now just to think about, and I'll happily talk about them. They were very humbling, those tours. But I think the thing that I found working for G7th has been a really, really good, it helps me keep all of it in perspective, because, you know, I like to give everyone a bit of time. And when you take people who are just starting out, you know, we had a guy the other day, he's a really good player, and he's doing some nice fingerstyle arrangements, and he's got, you know, 200 or 300 followers on his Instagram. And that was how he started his email. He just said, I know I've only got a few hundred followers and all this. And I wrote back and I said it politely. I said, you know, you don't need to start an email like that. I understand what you're saying, but what you're doing is very good and it speaks for itself. So I just did a story share for him, and he's growing and growing in numbers. He's experimenting with his popularity. And I'm not saying that me sharing one story is responsible for any of that, because it's not. But I think if you can encourage someone he's about 17 as well, and he's a really good player and his production's great. It's very simple, but it needs to be. You know, you don't need 10 different angles for an acoustic guitar, do you? You know, 2 is plenty, or 3 maybe at the most, but it's to the point. And I think the thing I've realized with it is exactly what you say. You know, people, if they do it for a living, you have to make a certain amount of money. You have to release new stuff on Spotify, or a certain amount of gigs, or a certain amount of lessons. And COVID made everyone, if they weren't teaching, you know, you could get lessons from Andy McKee and Tommy Emmanuel a lot more easily in lockdown over video, because no one was able to tour. And are people going to want to learn from me, or are they going to want to learn from one of those guys? You know, fair enough, they might have one lesson with them that will cost the same amount as 5 with me, but I'm not them. You know, they're going to want to learn from their heroes, and I completely appreciate that. So I think it definitely helps me on an ongoing basis as I see the grind that people have to put in. It definitely helps me to think, you know, I can do this. You know, I've got the skills to do whatever it might be. I can do some stuff on Spotify, some gigs, some writing and recording, but I like having that variety, and I like having the G7 thing as my base, as my regular, if you like, so I can build things around it. And I don't have to say yes to every gig that comes along anymore. You know, I think anyone who says, oh, I love every single gig that I do, well, you're either not telling the truth, or you're fortunate enough that you've worked hard enough and things have aligned enough for you to be at the point where you can only do gigs that are going to be very fruitful. And I can remember doing a couple of gigs on one weekend, and I had a bunch of exams as well, and the amount of travel was horrendous. It was playing in pubs to people who weren't up for that kind of thing. The people who booked them assured me they were really busy acoustic nights and all this. And I take that with a pinch anyway. But it was just one of those couple of gigs where you just think, all right, I'm happy to do a few less of these now. And COVID was a very good reset for me in that sense. It made me evaluate things. I want to watch my kid grow up as well. I don't want to be away. I don't want to be in Loughborough on a Tuesday night playing to no one as a charity gig or something, which is fine. I'll do those too. But I'll do maybe 2 of those a year rather than 10, and I'll spend some more time with them. So I think your perspective changes as you get older and more experienced. I think when you take something like, not even just fingerstyle guitar, because I sing as well, and I don't just do fingerstyle stuff, and I've got the harp guitar thing. And the last gig that I did, I've only really done one sort of theatre gig since the whole COVID thing subsided somewhat. But I did some electric as well, which was great. I hadn't really done that before, outside of the band context very much. And it was great fun. And I think now it's a case of, when I first started getting into acoustic guitar, I remember, as probably a lot of us did, when YouTube started, I think it was 2005 or 6, somewhere around there, and seeing Andy McKee's Candy Rap series that he did. I think that was a lot of people's starting point. Not everyone's, obviously, but I think for a lot of us, and I think at one point, I'm right in saying he had 3 of the top 5 videos on the whole platform, not just guitar videos. So, you saw them everywhere. And I can remember watching Drifting and Rylin and, the harp guitar stuff, like Into the Ocean. And I'd never seen anything like it before. It didn't occur to me you could play like that. And I can remember going and buying myself a Crafter acoustic from the local music shop, where I then worked in between 07 and 09. And then I upgraded to a Yamaha and started getting a bit more into the body slapping side of stuff, experimenting with pickups and all this kind of thing. And obviously now, there's so many options and so many people out there talking about their rigs. And I can just remember, I bought every Andy McKee arrangement there was. I tried to learn, a whole bunch of them. And in my mind, I thought, well, this is what I'll do. I'll keep working towards that. And the first album that I did, I released that in 2015, and that was all fingerstyle stuff, bar one song, wacky tunings and all this. And it was lovely to look back on and think that was such an inspiration for me. And from finding Andy's stuff, you get into, I suppose you've got, Don Ross, Thomas Lieb, Anton Dufour, Vicky Genfen, so many people I could name there, obviously, but they're the people I remember kind of coming across fairly early on. And Eric Mongrain as well. I remember going to see Vicky in a pub in Nottingham, saw Eric Mongrain there as well, saw Andy with Don Ross as well, which was just mind-blowing. I mean, that was one of those gigs you came away from it thinking, I'm not really sure that I really just saw that. It was just absolutely incredible. And you think, why are these guys not doing a 5,000 seater or a 500 seater at least? There's 50 of us in a pub on a Tuesday night in Nottingham. And of course, having done it a lot more myself now, I do understand a bit more why. And so I got more into doing that stuff as well, and thought, this will be my path. But I think at the same time, for me, I've always done backing vocals in the band, and I was in choirs when I was younger and didn't appreciate it fully. I've always enjoyed singing. So, Andy McKee's thing is very much, I think the tagline he used to have was, I use instrumental guitar music for words that I don't know how to say, or something along those lines. That's not verbatim.
Right. Oh, that's nice.
And it was, but worded better than that.
Yeah.
Like that, but good. And I remember thinking, well, but that's him though, and that's his thing, and that's great. So I sing a lot more now, and I enjoy that. And on all the releases I've done, I sing a lot more. And I think for a while I didn't do that, because I told myself, now I'm going to be a real purist. I'm only going to play. I'm only going to let the guitar speak and all that. But then again, I think you can only subdue who you are for so long. And what's wrong with experimenting it? I saw a really nice Ed Sheeran interview a few years ago where he said someone was asking him about writing songs. And I think they asked him something along the lines of, have you ever written any songs that are really bad? And he said, yeah, all the time. You just haven't heard them. And the way that he explained it, and again, not word for word, it was something to the effect of, if you've got a song there and you're at a wall with it and you can't make it good, you're just going through the motions with it and you think, God, I hate this. This is dreadful. Finish it anyway, and then just never listen to it, or never play it to anyone. And because then it's done. It's out of your brain. It's not like an octopus squatting on your brain anymore. And I thought, that's a really good
because he also talks about the water analogy, where to get to the clean water of quality songwriting, you've got to go through the dirty water. You've got to turn the tap on and let the dirty water come out. for you to get to the crystal clear stuff, which a lot of people think that they write something and you're like, no, you may have been writing that in dirty water territory. So just treat it like, he said something again, it's like, it's not word for word, but I those little nuggets, whether you like Ed Sheeran or not, it's not the brain he's got and the experience he's got, and over the years and stuff as well, talks about the 10,000 plus hours and stuff as well. Like all those analogies, like you said, it's just like, that's just part of the parcel, of, I mean, but when it comes around to your writing now, and it's interesting because, we've gigged together, we've done lots of stuff together, and and I suppose we've never spoke about each other's writing style. We haven't gone to the pub to do it, but no. Do you have a different approach now you've done all those albums? If you're approaching a new album out, is it different approach now to what it was back then? Because I suppose you were influenced by lots of other different guitarists back then, and I was the same. But now I'm like, oh no, I'm it's fine. That was like a learning education, and I was putting it into my music at the same time and making my own identity. And like you said, adding the singing on top, doing this and doing that. And because how many albums have you released now, Tommy?
So I did a full length one in 15, EP 16, full length in 17 and 18, and then I did a live one, and then I've done a couple of sort of singles here and there, if you like, and been on
exactly the same. Yeah.
So like about half a dozen releases, I guess. Right. Kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's the same. Yeah, because I'm on album 6 and with several EPs and a live once. We sound like we've done the same thing, but I think
Italy, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that was just my favorite shows, and I don't know if this is for you, are opportunity shows in regards to you get invited to come and do this thing, but they brought their community, they come there, and there's this warmth where that place becomes home. I don't know if Ireland felt this, but you play a show where, I don't know, you just go there and you've just got this vibe that, and Italy was this, it was just an invitation, and then there was, the venue was underneath the guy's house, and then you got to play. It was just one thing after another of like this experience, bang, 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 bang. And then I was like, when I came home, I was like, that feels like a home show, like somewhere I'd love to go back to every time because of the atmosphere that was created. And again, when it comes down to those moments and those opportunities or whatever it is, I don't know, that means so much more than, playing a show that's like thousands and thousands of people. Not saying I negate that or like, but there is a feeling of that. But I suppose when it comes around to the songwriting and to composition or arranging, and this new album at the moment, I was like churning out an album every year at one point, and then now this new album's been on the rack processing for about almost a year and a half to 2 years, which is the first time I've done this, and I'm just allowing things to sort of breathe and come in, but there's no influence from the outside, from like other music that I'm listening to or anything like that. Have you got to that point where your inspiration comes from just your natural way of playing and singing and experience?
I think a bit more so, yeah. And funny enough, I was going through, again, I was up in the loft the other day. I spend a lot of time in the loft and can't recommend it enough.
A bit warm in the summer.
Yeah, well, definitely. It's one of those things that you think, I haven't got this much. I've got twice as much as I thought. Yeah. I was doing what everyone does, going through all the hundreds of CDs that I've got, because 5 years ago you release something and you think, I'll get 250 of those done. I'll definitely sell them. That'll be fine. And of course, when did I last buy a CD? I haven't got a CD player. I've got a portable one that I can plug into the laptop. Very rarely use it.
Expensive beer mats now.
Yeah, I've got one in the car. But again, I was just going through the boxes of all the different releases I've done. And I was doing exactly what you just said there, thinking, I released one a year. And on the one hand, when I was doing that, I did like 4 in 4 years or 4 in 5 years. I forget what it was now. On the one hand, I'm proud that I managed to keep it that consistent. But at the same time, I look at it now and think, well, it's not a competition though, is it? You don't have to do a new album every year to be good at what you do. And sometimes, you can feel like you're forcing yourself a bit, can't you? And I can remember I'm not very good at recording. And luckily, my brother is the guy that does all my stuff. So Sam Luce, NA Studios, little plug there. Something he's very good at is helping me keep in the recording mindset, because I'm more about playing live. I think I'm definitely better at that. And obviously, this is the neurodivergent podcast. As I get older, I definitely notice a lot more tendencies that I have. I've learned a lot from you're very open with it, John. I don't think perhaps you realize quite how many people are looking at the stuff that you post, and thank you for sharing all of it, because you've been very open on your journey with all this and learning about yourself. And when you get to your mid-30s, as I am, and when you're a bloke as well, you perhaps feel that it's not as easy to talk about mental health. I like to think it's gotten easier for men, but I definitely feel a bit more confident now, thinking, well, why did I do that in that way? Oh, I still do, just a lot more now. I definitely notice a lot more tendencies that I have. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert on any of that, but I definitely notice more and more of these tendencies about myself, and I find ways of turning them into positives. I think, you hear certain words, just to throw a few out there that people do throw around, ADHD, autism, and any of the above, any of these things that come under the umbrella terms. Unfortunately, some of them are very heavily stigmatized. Well, because of the way that I'm very, hyper focused on certain things, that makes certain things that I do better. I am very meticulous with planning and deadlines and all this kind of stuff, whereas I might not be if I wasn't the way that I am. So I think in terms of something I've allowed myself to do in recent years is actually listen back to my own stuff, because I never really did that before. Not because I couldn't stand listening to it. I'm not some sort of tortured artist in inverted commas, who can't listen to their own stuff. I'm not Johnny Depp saying that I don't watch my own films or anything. Maybe he doesn't. That's fine. Whatever works for Johnny. But I think the more I listen to my own stuff, I do hear more little traits that I have that I suppose I sort of think, oh, that's a bit of me, that. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. That could come across as that, I suppose, but I don't mean it like...
I call them Johnisms. I have Johnisms that are like, as soon as I hear... My mate said, do you know what? That's such a John phrase to do.
So you.
And it's or like whether it is guitar or vocally, there are certain things, and some people have picked up on them, and I'm like, well, actually, as a personality trait, that we all have personality traits. So we're actually going to have musical traits that, if we come up with our own little hooks or riffs or little fillers, it's mainly the little fillers, actually. We might be playing a bulk of something, and then we do a little filler that goes into the next bulk. That is the little tiny signatures that, and again, it's not an ego thing. It's just something that we've, as creators, have come up with little tiny, links in between some certain things we do, or when we improvise. And that's the magic when you listen back to your own stuff. Because I listen back to this podcast as well, because I use it as talking therapy. And the only reason why I do it is that I could be like, oh, I listen to my own voice and stuff as well, but it's mainly to listen back for how I was at that point. Because when I'm recording this now, we could be listening to this 5-10 years down the line. We'll go, oh, that was a milestone back then. That we are publishing a snapshot of what it feels like in 2023. So when we listen back to those albums, our first album from mine was 2015. I listened back to it. I could go, but I'm like, no, that was part of the experiment, and that really does define the milestone of then. And I think, like the Ed Sheeran things, that, you might not listen to it because it's not there, but I think what we've done, and we've got that body of work where we'll be able to listen back to them. But I'm now thinking about my children and my grandkids. They'll be able to listen back to all those albums and go, that's what, Dad did, or whatever it is. So you are right. At one point, I wish I spread it out a bit more, maybe giving myself a bit of momentum, maybe didn't break even on every single project and They could get into that sort of territory. But actually, I'm like, do you know what? My writing now would not be as fruitful or as layered had I not done all those other 5 albums and all those EPs and everything as well. So I think there's a
sort of,
that experience of it. And how do you feel now as a solo musician going forward?
I don't feel any pressure at all with anything, which is really nice, because I think for us with the band that I play in, we're called Smokescreen. Years and years ago, we were on a, in inverted commas, label, which turned out to be a bogus thing. So then we weren't on it, and then we were on another one, which was a digital label. I don't know when that was. I guess probably about 2010-ish. We then got hit with this. It wasn't a lawsuit as such, but it was this kind of, well, you know, you said you were going to record 35 songs by this date and you haven't done it. It's in the contract. And I thought, okay, well, yeah, we signed it, but we didn't read it properly. You know, we were young, and we should have done, but we didn't. And then I looked in there, and underneath that, it said, well, also it says you're going to provide us the recording studio to do that. Oh, well, it's gone into liquidation, so we can't. And so I can remember saying to them, well, we'll call it quits then, shall we? Because, you know, it's a bit like saying, well, you said you were going to go and play football against this guy. And I said I'd give you the boots and the football, but I haven't done that. Yeah, so what's your point? You haven't done your bit. I haven't done mine. I couldn't do my bit without yours, though, could I? And so now, I think the whole label thing, I mean, again, it's an easy thing, isn't it? Getting signed. For as many years as I can remember, that was the thing that we talked about in the band, and all the other bands did as well. If you're signed, really, what you're saying is you're going to get a bigger reach, aren't you? It's kind of like for us with G7 Capos, you know, we couldn't reach the entire world just by selling through our website. We need our capos in stores all over the world. We need distribution, we need retailers. And that's why we do things like the Trade Tuesdays posts on social media to say thank you, because, you know, no one has to distribute our stuff and no one has to sell it. Fair enough, they're making money from doing it. And so are we. And that allows us to continue to be a brand and allows them to continue doing what they're doing. So it's a balance, isn't it? And it's a bit of back scratching. And so for me, I think something that I've gotten a lot more on board with now, the TikTok thing, like when my 15-year-old was about 10 or 11, they had it was called Musical.ly before TikTok, and I didn't know it was the same thing. So I knew a tiny bit about that, but not much. And then one of the guys, like one of the directors at G7th, said, oh, I think we should get on TikTok. And I wasn't convinced. I admit it. I said, I don't know much about the platform. I don't know if it's really the right thing for us, but I'll give it a go. I had a go. I was pretty clueless with it, and we didn't get much traction. Then we had a couple of videos that did really well. And I went back to Ian and said, actually, yeah, I was wrong. You were right. I hadn't been patient enough. I hadn't posted enough stuff. And I just remember him saying, told you, it's worth considering. And he was absolutely right. And I'm glad that he encouraged me to do that. And so I've now got my own TikTok for my own playing. And that's a recent thing. And it's been really nice, actually. I've been sort of trolling through my Facebook and my Instagram and YouTube thinking, well, fair enough. Not all of this is me playing now. I'm going to do more as I move on. But I'm reposting some stuff I've already done just to sort of put my own body of work and playing out there. And it's been quite nice. And something I've realized more and more, I'm 36 now, and I started teaching guitar when I was about 13, 14. I've been, a teacher, I've been a lecturer, I've been an examiner. I do artist relations and I do customer service now as well. So much of what I've done throughout my professional and a lot of my personal career and life has been helping other people, teaching people stuff, helping people with stuff. And I'm not trying to sound like some altruistic lord, but that's the reality. And obviously I've done a lot for myself as well, but now I just think, well, it's time to put a bit more focus on myself now. The kids off to college in September, so I'll still be needed, but in slightly different ways. There'll be less help with certain things and more with others. And yeah, it's definitely made me become a bit more of a guitar player again. And my brother and I are currently working with this label. Sorry about the plane. I'll just let that go over.
I can't even hear it. That's fine. Carry on, mate.
It wasn't one, so I was just playing a trick on it.
See if I was paying attention. I hadn't frozen.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a massive one, and it's moving really slowly from what I could hear. But yeah, and so I think in terms of my own career, if you like now, something I think is an absolute godsend is I love being able to just whip my phone out and think, right, I've got this idea. I'll record a 30-second clip so I don't forget it. And I like looking back through all of them. And inevitably I do what probably all of us do. I end up with 300 different ideas after 3 months and think, God, I don't think any of these go together, do they? So you upload them all on the computer eventually when your phone says you've got no more storage left. And eventually some pieces of the puzzle fit together. I'm not always great at finishing stuff. I do have to force myself a little bit sometimes. But again, I don't particularly have to force anything because there's no pressure on me to release anything. I'm not reliant on Spotify or YouTube for my living or career or anything like that. it really is a case of doing stuff because I want to do it now, and it does feel nicer. And I think in the nicest way possible. I don't have any aspirations anymore of thinking, well, I could be the next Andy McKee or the next this or the next that. That drove me a lot in the earlier days, but now I just think, well, I listen back to what I've done. I've learned an awful lot through doing that, and an awful lot through my time with G7, and I respect everyone who does it massively. I mean, someone in particular who I've become quite friendly with, and I think he's very much set the standard out there for a lot of people doing that kind of stuff, is Alan Gogol.
Yeah.
And I think you'd be hard pushed to find someone who's dedicated more of his existence to what he does than him. And that's not to say that he is the most hardworking. There's loads of people out there who are incredibly hardworking, but for him, I think his stuff is just, it's indisputably him. You listen to 3 seconds of it, it's him. You listen to one note of Carlos Santana or a lick from Noel Gallagher. To me, I can tell it a mile off because I've listened to it for so long. Or you listen to the vibrato of B.B. King and you think,
I get that with Manelli, actually. Manelli Jamal, he's the same sort of thing where he kind of... It's
tireless work.
Yeah, and Will Mitnickle as well. Both of that. Yeah, they're just. It's like, and I'm like, wow, like every day in an amazing way, and it's high quality, and also so signature that you can listen. I can listen to Will, and I can listen to Manelli, and I can listen to Alan, and I can go, boom. It's just clean cut. I know their identity. I know their signature. But it's not just in one genre. They can go into multiple genres if they wanted to, and they could still sound like themselves. Sure. And that's a beautiful trait to have, but also to be just really wonderful, down to earth guys at the same time, and be lovely people, but be extraordinary musicians. And every time I reach out to them or it always just feels like it's just warmth. And I don't know if you can get that in other areas of the industry. You probably could, but I know in our circle of acoustic guitarists and things, we're I don't know, we're just a bunch that I've met that are all generally pretty warm. But yeah, Alan, man, definitely all the time. It's just like how much he brings out, and how much and the content and things. You're just like, no, I can't. I can't get anywhere near this. But,
totally, yeah. I think something that I really respect Alan about as well. He's so willing to share what he learns. He'll post
that as well
of his reach and his earnings, and he'll say, right, I've spent this much on this type of campaign. Here are the results. And you look at it and you just think there would be people out there selling courses on this that wouldn't give info that was as useful for hundreds of pounds. And Alan's given it out for free because he's very much treating himself as the guinea pig in a way. And I can remember a while ago, someone jumped on him a little bit and said, yeah, well, the only reason he's doing that is because he wants to kind of appear to be this guy that's leading the pack. But he is. He actually is doing that, at least he's one of the people doing it, because he's willing to put his own, he's financing a lot of this on his own, like presumably all of it on its own, and he's spending money and he's showing you the results that he's getting. So maybe the rest of us can avoid some pitfalls. I can't really see anything bad about that.
Well, isn't like a lot of people think leaders are like at the top, and then they're like, or we go up to them, but actually a leader and a genuine leader is amongst the pack. Like they just want the best for everybody, and you see this in films or whatever TV. Like they are the ones in the mix of it and stuff, and they're not looking for glory for themselves. It's literally going, look, this is what I'm trying to do at the moment. This is what it is, and just delivering. And it's just, it's amazing that how giving. I think that's a climate. Yeah, you're right. There are some who will be able to say that, and that's absolutely fine. Maybe they're not in that circle of the warmth that we feel and things as well. But yeah, it is wonderful to see that the amount of content and the amount of music that he's creating and stuff as well. But sort of flip it on the other side. But and it also feels, I mean, the opportunities and the, you know, the people he's meeting now, you can like, you feel this kind of like, mate, I'm so pleased and proud for you, mate. Like, and that's a lovely feeling to have. Whereas like a lot of the music industry could be like, oh God, you know, I wish I had that. Or how did you get that and stuff as well? It's like, no, you know, there's just this feeling we've all got each other's backs in most cases, I feel.
Yeah, I think most cases is definitely right there. And again, like there was the thing that Alan posted with him and Tenacious D recently, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And I looked at that, and my first thought was, and I mean this in a positive way, I'm not surprised by that, because, you know, whether you like what Tenacious D do at all, to kind of give a bit more clarity on that, I mean that in a very positive way with Alan. It doesn't surprise me that he's mixing with people at that high up the ladder, because he's so good at what he does, and his stuff has been featured in so many different places because he's so tirelessly worked at doing one thing. You know, he doesn't try and do 10 different things, does he? And he's found an extreme niche and he's stuck with it. And, you know, that's the thing, isn't it? You know, it's like hyper focus. And something that I just thought of as well, this popped into my head briefly a moment ago. There are a few things you said that triggered it. This probably relates a bit more to the green light thing, but this one I think is worthy of mentioning here. Someone else who really helped me with something, I don't know if she realized quite how much she helped with it, is Emma McGann. I don't know if you've come across Emma before.
No.
So Emma is based in the West Midlands. She's a friend of mine from back in the Cobb Uni days. She was on the composition course and I was on performance. We were there at the same time, and she used to run local acoustic nights. Emma's fantastic. You know, she does acoustic guitar stuff. She does sort of the more pop stuff as well. She's fantastic. You know, she's a really, really lovely person. She's great at what she does. She's a very well respected streamer, you know, like on YouNow, on Twitch. She's done stuff all over the place. And something that I remember her saying to me a while ago, and I didn't realize how much this helped me at the time either. So yeah, shout out to Emma. Thanks, Emma. And also a G7 user. So you know she has good taste. Goes without saying.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was talking to her about, you know, publishing and PRS and all this kind of thing. And I just said to her, at the minute, I'm using this, this, and this. And I think she'd just done a talk with CD Baby and PRS. And she said, well, I'm using this, this, and this. And it was very similar to what I was using. And she finished it up by saying, that's what seems to be working well for the moment. And that really stuck with me, because I just thought it's very easy to just keep doing and doing what you're doing and presuming it will be okay forever, thinking that you'll always be at this level. It's kind of like, and I don't mean this in a defeatist way, but you look at people now, and they're appearing on, you know, loads of different podcasts. It's very easy to just sort of think, oh, they're doing it to keep the profile up. Well, also, there are all these new platforms, so why would you not experiment with them? You know, the way that music's consumed, yeah, it's very different now. The cost of making an album. I mean, I do lessons with this guy who's nearly 80, and he played in a band in the 60s. And he said, the thing is, back in our day, if you like, someone had to like you for you to be able to make an album. And I thought, that's an interesting point, because if I want to record, I can do a bit of basic recording on my own, but I can release it if I want. I can put it out into the world. They didn't have the facility in the same way. So this is what's working at the moment. What I took from that was it might change at some point down the line. And it has done. And everything's continually evolving, isn't it? And a lot of it is driven by money, obviously. That's the world, isn't it? But also in terms of how you get your music out there, if you think that one thing will work the same way forever, well, you're probably in for a harsh reality slap, aren't you? And, you know, we're getting all sorts of reports now, like bands as big as Megadeth, who are saying, you know, it's expensive to tour. It's expensive to have a day off. It costs us more money to have a day off than it does to not. And, you know, when people at that level are feeling the pinch as well, you have to be, I think it makes you a bit more grateful. You know, you just think, well, okay, maybe I'm not at their level, but at least it's not costing me as much to do this. And, you know, in terms of reach as well, you know, you look at a band who have got 10,000 Facebook followers and they put a post out and they get 500 likes on it. And you think, we've been very conditioned to think that, you know, more likes mean more good, more positivity. But, you know, I speak to people all the time, like session guys over in Nashville, for example, like with the G7 stuff, they might only have 5,000 followers on Instagram, but it's a very concentrated and specific 5,000 followers that are all directly related to what they do. You know, they might have 1 million, but only 3,000 of them might care particularly about what this person does. So I think it's all about relevance, isn't it? But you can't always tell how relevant someone's followers are or how specified they are. So there's always a bit of suck it and see and experimentation. And so I think, yeah, that whole business of this is what's working for now. Be prepared to adapt. You have to be able to.
It's like AI that's coming out. You know, if you
exactly.
go against completely all of it, then that's fine. Everyone's got skepticism, all sorts of things. But like, yes, a lot of people saying it's going to do this and do that, and it could ruin jobs and stuff as well. But I'm like, well, if I could just use it in a certain way that can actually help or do this, and there's tweaks here and stuff as well. Like you said, I think the way we go to our instruments and the way we go to our music, and I think the beauty of being the kind of solo musicians and we are, it is a lot of experimentation. We don't actually work a lot in white lines of, you know, we've got to write for the machine, so we've got to churn out so many sales and CDs and stuff. If we did that, then everything else, where's our authenticity in our life and things as well? Whereas I think with our music, so because it's so experimental, I think because we've got that creative brain, we're almost willing to go, do you know what? I'm going to just test it out. It's like podcasting. I mean, you know, I'm in sort of episodes 20 now, but I'm like, when I started this, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I think that's also another thing, to be humble. Just sort of say, do you know what? I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway.
I'm having a go.
That's sometimes the best motto. I mean, one of the mottos I said this year, I want to outsource my weaknesses and focus on my strengths. But that's not I'm not going to negate my responsibilities or anything as well. I just want to be able to get some help and stuff. But I think that is, if you can kind of, a lot of musicians lead their life in that way. And I think it's, and I know you get this a lot with G7, and I know a lot of companies get, but when musicians contact other companies or and they're going, can you, I need help with this, do this and stuff as well. It's just like, you know, build a rapport, there's a human behind everything that we do and stuff.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think that is the most important thing. You know, the way we connected and where we did, like, you know, when we did the Fingerstyle Hub festival over COVID, and like these things were born out authentically, and we were like, oh, and it worked really, really well. And that's, again, like we were talking about milestones and memories, that's a massive memory of COVID that I'm going to always carry with me and things. But that was an experiment. That was like, we don't know if it's going to work. How is it going to work? Just throw it in and then do 15-minute slots, and then introduce it somehow, or someone do this and stuff. And I think it's almost like we just threw it together, and we all bloody loved it. And I mean, I know we haven't done anything since, but I think it's that, for me, just like sums up when we're trying to experiment with different platforms or different ways of doing stuff. And I don't know if that's the beauty of having a creative brain, where there can be pessimism and skepticism in society and everything as well. But I kind of I like to be a neutral. So I kind of sort of try and disconnect, and I go, no, actually, how can I use this for good? How can I use any of this stuff? How can I use AI or ChatGPT, or how can I use it for good? And then show someone else, look, this is, and I was doing ChatGPT the other day with someone. I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do it for that. I mean, yeah, just type in this and try this, and comes out with your dreams and aspirations action plan. It's like, oh my goodness. And it's not like, nothing's perfect, but if it can give you more clarity and anything internally, I think that's, as musicians, you know, when you reach out to someone, or like we're connecting now, it's just on a level of like, it's just a chat, man. We're not looking to get anything out. Like, we're just having a nice sort of friendly chat and things. And I think that is probably, as a solo musician, that both of us were just trying to be as authentic as we can, and just kind of lead it forward in a way that just feels really not contrived. We're not forcing it. Everything just feels natural. And I sort of feel with those guys like Alan and things, you know, he's constantly experimenting. It's just creativity. If he's creative in his way in his guitar, he's doing that in every area of his life. And that's kind of like, it flows down to us where we're like, if he can do it, then let's just test it out and just do it that way. So
definitely.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Sweet. Dude, sorry. And this is what I love. Sometimes we can just bounce off and go into so many different rabbit holes of different things and stuff. Definitely. So, but mate, thank you so much for jumping on. Always an absolute pleasure when we get to have a chat, because we can talk about so many different areas of life, whether it's musician, fatherhood. We do this in our natural chats, and I love it, man, because a lot of musicians or a lot of people can speak on surface level, but when we start chatting, we can go to deeper levels really, really quickly. And it's such a wonderful thing to have, because we're so like connected in sort of similar minded way and stuff. So yeah, man. And is there anything you're working on at the moment, or anyone that can go and visit? I don't know. Have you got, is your website up and things? I can't remember. Let us know.
I'll tell you the spiel. And by the way, you mentioned the Fingerstyle Hub festivals we did there. It was so lovely to have you on board, and you were a great source of inspiration there. Thank you so much for all your hard work with it. Fingerstyle Hub's obviously still going. I don't do as much with it now. Nick G7 actually does quite a lot of moderating on it for me, which is very kind. Thank you very much, Nick. But yeah, in terms of my stuff, I have still got the website that needs a bit of an update, but I've got the TikTok, the Instagram, the Facebook, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm getting more active with it again, and I'm enjoying it. So I've actually got some new electric instrumental stuff that I'm working on. There'll be videos coming out soon with that over the summer or thereabouts. So yeah. There's
where can people go to? Have you got is it Tommy Loose or Tommy Loose Music or?
So I think it's Tommy and Chums on Facebook, but if you put my name in, it will come up. But yeah, just Tommy Loose, TOMMYLOOSE. Yes, that is my real surname. People ask me that a lot, mostly in America. But yeah, so Instagram and TikTok and all that is under Tommy Loose. But yeah, thank you ever so much for having me again, mate. And
no worries, dude.
It's okay to slip it in. I can see we've got 2 minutes 19. Shall I tell you the green light tip thing that I was thinking of?
Yes, let's do that very, very quickly. Cool.
So what it is, years ago when I was at Cov Uni, Martin Atkins, the drummer from Public Image Limited, came in and he said something that riled everybody up, but it was really interesting and I still remember it now. He came in and he had an overhead projector, presentation and all this. And the first thing he did, he was promoting a book called Tour Smart that he'd written, which I've got. It's really, really good. Loads of tips and tricks, ways of not getting done over, And the first thing he put on the screen was music is not necessary. And then he just walked out for a bit. And of course, he came back in and he said, you're probably all a bit pissed off, aren't you? Seeing as I'm meant to be inspiring you, you need to remember that it's not necessary. And what I mean by that is I'm a professional drummer. I've got 4 kids. I've got a mortgage. I've got a studio. But who cares? Why should anyone pay me to do anything? There's loads of other people out there who are arguably better than me. Just remember you're not special, essentially. And it was very humbling. And I've always remembered that because I just think when he says not necessary, to me it is necessary. But at the same time, if you lose your job, you worry about paying your mortgage rather than guitar lessons, maybe. And it was very humbling. And I've never forgotten that. It was really, really worth hearing. That was about 14 years ago, and I still think about it regularly. And it's the number one thing I reach for when anything comes up like this in a chat or a podcast. So if you remember that, I think it holds you in good stead. There are so many other people out there doing what you do. People might not always flock to you every time. Doesn't mean you're not good. Doesn't mean you're not worthy. Keep that in mind. And I think it helps you to just keep a better perspective.
Just grounding yourself.
That's a better word for it. Yeah.
In a way that is just like, and I resonate so much with that. And we can fluctuate, like there is a natural, and especially in the music industry and things as well. But I think just try and focus on that in the way that like is the ego, is the arrogance starting to kick in with that and stuff as well. And just ground ourselves and stuff as well, and enjoy the ride. Just enjoy the process. Don't worry about the destination and stuff. So, mate, thank you so much. And yeah, man, you're always a legend.